Welcome to The Helping Conversation, an exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of facilitating trusting, safe, inclusive, and effective helping conversations with others. The helping conversation is at the core of the sacred partnership between two people when one is there to help the other. Recorded at RockVox Recording and Production Studios, Rochester, New York. Find your voice and broadcast it to the world at RockVox, rockvox.com. And now your host of The Helping Conversation, Keith Greer.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Helping Conversation. I am your host, Keith Greer, and we are here, as we are for each episode, to explore and celebrate the practice, art, and science of the helping conversation. I just want to revisit our definition that we use, because too often people assume that a helping conversation is only facilitated by people in some of the more traditional helping fields like social work and counseling and psychology. But the definition that we use is a helping conversation is any conversation where one person in the moment is there to support another person and or is there to support the growth and development of a person, a team, or an organization. So I'm sure you'll agree with me that with that definition, it very much expands all of the people who engage in their own unique brand of a helping conversation. And I am pleased on a whole lot of levels today to have in the studio with us my very special guest, Sandy Greer. And yes, we'll get the first really important question out of the way. She is my sister. And we have been in this conversation, she and I, for the past 30 years, because we both have probably been working about the same amount of time, about some of the commonalities and differences in the helping conversation that Sandy facilitates versus the helping conversation that I facilitate. So let me do a really quick introduction so you know who Sandy is. Sandy, in the world of banking, is a vice president and trust and investment officer. She provides investment management and fiduciary support for individuals, families, endowments, foundations, as well as charitable and not-for-profit organizations. With over 30 years of experience in both personal and institutional investment management, she helps her clients reach their financial goals and manages equity, fixed income, and alternative investment portfolios using a comprehensive wealth management approach. Sandy earned both her undergraduate and graduate degrees from SUNY at Buffalo. Sis, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
So let's start with the first question, which is just fill us in a little bit on your journey that resulted in you sitting here 30 years down the road, having carved out this very successful career in the world of investments.
Well, I never really expected to be here. I thought that my career choice was going to be one of actively helping people, whether in social work or teaching, or a career that would be much more directly related to helping people. And went to college for that, went to graduate school. And when I'm writing my master's thesis, I found a home at Buffalo Savings Bank. I wrote my thesis on the Community Reinvestment Act and how that act was helping the city of Buffalo with revitalizing some of the older sections of Buffalo. I suddenly found myself being offered an opportunity to join their management trainee program. And at the time, women were not really being viewed as management trainees in finance. I was thrilled to take the opportunity, and I did. And not long after was given the chance to join the Treasury group, which was even more of a rarity. So that was sort of how I found my way to the world of finance. For the first years, I was working in the institutional environment, managing bank assets. But the vast majority of my career has been working with individuals and families.
Right. So let's step back even a little bit earlier, because you mentioned that you had this vision that you would somehow be in a helping profession somewhere,
Correct.
maybe not banking until that opportunity came along. So as you look back on that, what were maybe some early experiences that you could look at now and say, there was some of the first indications that I was going to do something helping others?
Yes. Well, I think you would agree that was very much the spirit of the family we grew up in.
No question.
Both of our parents were very focused on doing whatever they could to help someone in need.
Right.
And that ethic was part of how we grew up. So when I think back to my teenage years, I remember teaching physically handicapped kids to swim.
Right.
I remember tutoring kids. In college, it was really the beginning of the women's movement. And I was involved in any number of community activities, doing volunteer work there. So it's always just been ingrained. And when I got to a point that I really was starting to build a professional career, it manifested itself in being involved with many charities, whether it was doing actual hands-on volunteer work or sitting on boards.
Right.
And helping organizations, helping not-for-profit organizations figure out how to navigate whatever the vagaries of society was at that given point in time.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I always think of the story Mom and Dad used to tell of when they were in Florida. I think they're in Florida or something, and they picked up that young couple with a little child
boy
on the side of the road.
In a rainstorm.
In a rainstorm,
Yes.
right, yes. Yeah, because I can still picture our father thinking our mother had to be the craziest person in the world to
Yes.
say, Larry, pull over and pick
That's
them
right.
up.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. But that story resonates. That's a powerful story. So you mentioned that you entered the world of banking. You don't see too many people who look like you gender-wise.
Correct.
As you moved into that field. So I have to think even at that time, there had to be some role models or trailblazers or people who just you looked up to, helped pave the way. Who maybe were some of those folks?
So interestingly enough, when I think about people who were mentors, there really weren't women mentors.
Right.
There were so few opportunities for women to enter management tracks that in reality, there was a sense we were all in competition for those few opportunities.
Right.
I was really blessed, though. When I look back on my career, I had a few male mentors. And I don't think I was in the Treasury group for more than a couple of days when a very senior broker and sort of old-time Wall Street guy, who sadly is long gone, Fred Gerald, said, "You're smart, you'll do a great job, and anybody gives you any kind of guff, you come to me." And now I say it sounds so paternalistic.
That's
Yes.
exactly what I was thinking.
Right. But I needed somebody to say, I'm there for you. And
Right.
you don't have to worry about whether I'm going to think less of you if you say you need help.
Right.
The other mentor who I still have a very close relationship with is a gentleman named Dick Marshall. He was the head of the Treasury group. And when I was being vetted on this short list from the management trainee program, all the other candidates for the Treasury group were men.
Right.
And his decision to offer me the position, and I knew about as much about stocks and bonds as, a hole in the wall. People were pretty upset. Most of his male colleagues were pretty upset. And we had a conversation not long after he offered me the job. And I said, I'm just curious, why would you take this chance? And he said, it's really simple. You're a woman. You're going to work 10 times as hard as any of the other men who know less than you do.
Right.
And that goes back probably 35, 36 years. And he really did teach me everything I knew and continue to learn about this industry.
Right.
So on the professional side, the last one would be a gentleman also, long gone, His name was Larry Southworth, and he became my manager when I was much further along in business. And I understood the dynamics of what makes a successful collaborative effort. And Larry was someone who made it really clear that he didn't take credit for all of his success. He identified that as a function of hiring the smartest people he could find.
Right.
And when he asked your opinion about something, he wanted you to tell him what you really thought. And he made it really clear he might or might not take your advice, but he wanted his decision-making process to be a collaboration of the best minds he could surround himself with. And I've always taken that as kind of the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not always utilized.
Yeah. I was just going to say, not modeled
today.
in leadership.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So
right.
Those would be the people on the professional side who I'd identify as sort of shaping the way.
Right. Right. And I don't know if luck is the right word, but it's the only word I can think of right now. How lucky at that time, entering a world of men, that there were men who were far enough along in their
yes.
ability to think beyond some stereotypical ways of being a man.
Yes.
To be there for you in a really genuine and authentic way.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The PG explanation is that I was appalled, and I'm sure I told you about it at the time. I was appalled when I found out that the word going around this bank was that I must be sleeping with the chairman.
Right.
If I was given this sort of plum job. And I, it was inconceivable to me that people could even think that, never mind that no one really knew me. But it was very much the thinking. And sadly, even in 2020, I'm not sure that there aren't times
right.
that people ascribe someone's success, a woman's success, anyone's success, to factors that have nothing to do with just the fact they'll work hard and be incredibly competent.
Right, at what you do. So I want to dig in a little bit into your specific type of helping conversation, because I have a feeling there could be people listening who would not have equated investment banking with a helping conversation. And yet, and I don't remember the stat because I saw it just a little while ago when you and I were talking about coming in here today, of the percentage of people who never talk about their finances. There was a stat.
Well, the statistic was somewhere in excess of 40% of Americans would rather talk about any subject other than their finances.
Right, right. And I that so resonates with me because I think through my career, of all of the incredibly intimate, vulnerable conversations I have been a part of, and that ain't one of them.
Correct.
Like people just don't. And then I found myself even thinking, I'm pretty blessed. I have some really, really close friends. We talk about a lot of things. And I can't tell you what any of my friends, what their salary is or how much money they have in the bank. And so before we get into how you do that conversation, what's your take on that? What is it about this topic that just is so difficult for people to talk about?
I think that money is so wrapped up in people self-identifying themselves as successful or failures.
Right.
Without regard for the obvious things. There are people who are blessed with inheritance. There are people who are blessed with very lucrative positions. And then there are people who make incredible contributions to their communities and their occupations and don't get paid. It's the conversation about, and certainly in today's world, it's the conversation about what teachers are providing in our society and the fact that their compensation has always been in question as to how is it we don't compensate them for what they do. So I think that it's wrapped up in so many other characteristics about who we think of ourselves as.
Right.
I've told you this before. I have two dear friends. One owns a hair salon, And she's always told me all these stories about the kind of information people share when they're getting their hair cut. The other is a psychiatrist.
Yeah, right.
And the three of us on many occasions laugh about the fact of the three of us who ends up getting far too much personal information.
Yeah.
And without exception, it's me.
Right.
Because if someone's going to talk to you about their money, there is so much wrapped up in that.
Right.
About who they are,
Yeah.
who their families are,
Right.
what's going on at work, what's going on at home. So it opens up. There's not a subject it doesn't.
I was just going to say
touch.
that if I have enough trust in you
Yes.
to talk to you about money, all those other subjects might even feel easier to talk to you
Correct.
about. Right.
Correct.
Right. So given that dynamic of how difficult it is for us folks to talk about money and whatever that all represents for us. So I know in my corner of the helping conversation, there are certain theories or modalities that guide a lot of how I do what I do. So what do you immediately bring into the room when you sit down with someone brand new that constitutes your understanding and your sensitivity to how difficult this conversation is right from the start?
Right. I think that most everyone has a gut sense about whether they are dealing with someone who's authentic.
Right.
And I think you pick that up at hello, oftentimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is who I feel an affirmative obligation to be for anyone who I am speaking with, whether that's an existing client, whether that's someone who's just been referred to chat with me about their situation or about what I might bring to the table.
Right.
And that it's not about me, and it's not about selling, and it's not about my defining what the relationship will look like. There are many preliminary conversations that are for the sole purpose of us getting to know whether there's the potential for a relationship. Because based on what we've just said,
right.
If we're talking about some of the most intimate aspects of life, someone has to make a decision that that's a relationship they want to build with me.
Right. And I'm wondering, and now I'm probably going to show my bias, but I'm wondering how many people out there would say one of their worries about sitting down with someone to talk about their finances is this person just going to try and sell me stuff? Correct.
And I will tell you, Keith, and I say this again with over 35 years in this industry, I'm not overly proud of some of the evolution in my industry, which has become selling.
Right.
But not that we're any different than anybody else.
Right.
I want the people who come to me or who I have an existing relationship, I want to make sure they are always completely clear that my role is not to sell. I have nothing to sell. I have the opportunity to offer a service.
Right.
And because it is so relationship driven, it's not like any other service industry.
Right.
So that's probably the critical foundation that you start to build.
Right.
Is that first we need to understand what is your situation and what are the issues, what are the obstacles, what are the concerns, what of a celebratory nature is happening in your life. You're getting married, you're having a grandchild, you've moved to a new job, you've moved to a new home, and the other side, you've lost a spouse, you've lost a parent. Having those conversations that is so personal, and you spend, at least in my estimation, if you spend enough time building a foundation, exploring those issues, all the conversations about what recommendations I would make on the financial side, that comes very naturally.
Right. I just want to read a quote from you around this concept of authenticity. Clients are not interested in being sold. They're looking for help from real people. Who I am professionally and personally is the same. And what I love about that is I've always had this somewhat silly idea in my head that if people who know me from different contexts in my life, you, a friend, a client, a coworker, a colleague, we're all in a room together and somehow talking about me, that everyone would be saying, yeah, that's Keith. Right? That consistency of character of who you are. And I think sometimes in a variety of different versions of the helping conversation, this part doesn't get appreciated as a starting point of just, because people do read it. They read,
yes.
Are you real? Are you not real? Are you trying to sell me something? And, we know there's some of the work in the world of neurochemistry of trust. People walk in a room and in 0.07 seconds upon laying eyes on you, they're making decisions as to whether you are trustworthy.
Interesting.
Right?
Yes.
Right? So that authentic part is huge. Right. So, all right. So you sit down and the authenticity is there. What other skills and ways of thinking start to come to the fore in you facilitating, again, this very personal, intimate, vulnerable making conversation with people?
So I am a big believer, and I've put a lot of work and continue to put a lot of work into the skill of listening. I know conceptually that while someone is speaking, our brains immediately start formulating the answer.
The answer.
And I do know from personal experience that while my brain is formulating the answer, I'm missing important information.
Yeah.
So many years ago, I was actually taking a sales class, but the gentleman who was kind of the guru was really very, very intuitive, very insightful. He was speaking more from a sales and marketing standpoint, but he talked about the difference in how two people will relate to each other if the desk in front of them is empty. So that instead of having the stack of brochures or reports that you can take all of those and you can tap them all in a nice even pile, and then you move them all the way to the side of the desk.
Right.
And so it's understood that there are materials that can be referenced, that can be talked about, but that the first order of business is listening to why that person has come to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I will also say it doesn't come easily.
No, I think all of us who are drawn to the helping world, we have a bit of a fix-it gene, right? And the fix-it gene is, I've got an answer for you, versus doing what you just said, which is, some people would call it listening to connect.
Yes.
Right? Just listen.
Right.
Right. I love the metaphor of the empty desk.
Yes.
Right? It takes all the stuff away and it's just you and me.
Right. Right.
So I'm curious, how do people in your world, the clients that you work with, respond to that? Because I'm assuming some of them come in and think the way you're going to help them is you are going to give them answers.
Correct. Not just answers, but solutions. That is where clients and probably even more so prospective clients are always rather surprised when I explain that the first three interactions we have really will be having a conversation.
Right.
That in most instances, when someone comes in and you're talking about personal finance, chances are you don't even necessarily know the right questions to ask. So it's that exploring that takes place,
right,
that helps you unearth that there's a child with a issue, or
right,
or a handicap, or
right,
there's a we deal, sadly, if there is any sort of substance issue.
Yeah, right.
The other thing that happens certainly in a family dynamic is, and I say this as a parent, is that desire to have everything be equal and fair. And we have a lot of conversations when we start to talk about things like estate planning.
Right.
How do you make decisions about who to name as guardian of your children? Mm-hmm. Should you and your spouse pass? How do you make a decision when there's one child who, at least based on what you know now, and certainly when I'm dealing with people with adult children,
Right.
one child, probably it is not in their best interest to inherit outright. But you have two other children who it would be perfectly appropriate for.
Fair is not always equal.
And fair is not always equal.
Right.
And knowing your children and knowing or having a sense of what is in their best interest, and how do you execute that?
So what you're telling me is that you're a family therapist.
Yes. Yes. But if you don't at least offer an opportunity to explore those very difficult and often painful issues, then you have no opportunity to really offer meaningful advice or even just give some insight into what are the considerations as you're trying to come up with a plan.
Right. So another quote I saw from you, which I so relate to, is you say, it's about balancing the qualitative aspect of a friend with the rigorous quantitative analysis needed in financial planning and investment management. And I know in my end of the helping conversation and in the training that I do, we often talk about that in a helping role, you are a friend, but it's a friend with certain rules.
Yes.
Right? Certain guidelines, certain levels of intimacy that is different than just a friend I have in my social world.
Right.
But to be able to honor that friendship part by asking lots of questions, listening really deeply, sounds really key.
Right. I think that I think this is sort of a distinction I make between someone who's in a true therapeutic environment. I believe that demonstrating personal empathy speaks volumes to the people that I speak with.
Yes.
So while there's always that line between what you share, telling a woman who's going through a fairly hellacious divorce and now faced with raising her children, potentially without adequate financial support, and having to think about selling the home she's raised her kids in. I, over the years, have decided I don't need to keep that part of my life a secret. It serves much more of a positive benefit for someone to hear, been there, and I get it.
Right.
And now let's put life back together.
Right. So some other parallels with other helping conversations is empathy, right? And that another bias of mine. I think sometimes those of us in the helping world, we minimize the complexity of what empathy is, because an empathic moment means, one, I have to completely honor your take on that part of your life. This is how you experienced it.
Right.
And then go someplace in me that could be a pretty uncomfortable place to go.
Yes.
To connect on an emotional level or an experiential level, which then leads to this whole other skill of self-disclosure.
Yes.
Am I in a relationship that is safe enough for me?
Right.
As the helping person.
Right.
To self-disclose.
Right. And to figure out how to remain respectful of the other person's take on what's going on in their life, because it's just once you have offered an empathic response, it's way too easy to then look at decisions they're making
Right.
and think that you have a right to have a voice.
Yeah.
And even though in my head, when you think about you're having a conversation with a friend and they're telling you about whatever choices they're making, and you're thinking, maybe that's not the best choice. This is where this is a client. This is a professional connection.
Right.
And to remain respectful of the decisions they're making.
Right.
Being frank in speaking about
Sure.
what the implications are going to be financially.
Right. Right. But the outcome is theirs.
Absolutely.
The outcome is theirs.
Absolutely.
So one of the guiding thoughts in my world is, how do I see the people I work with as the best resource in their own life?
Correct.
Right? And so that's honoring the decision is theirs, the outcome is theirs. And I was struck because, again, I think sometimes would people think of this in terms of the type of helping conversation you do. A quote from a client of yours that quote, "You've covered difficult ground with quiet assurance. We feel most confident in your care." And I was struck by that word, care.
Yes.
Because it could be a bias of mine, but I think how many people would use that word in what a money manager does. But the kind of conversation you're talking about, I could see people walking away feeling cared for.
Yes. Well, and today is June 29th, 2020. And I am on the phone with clients all day, every day. And what people have been thanking me for most, since I can't really tell them what the market's going to do, is being there.
Yeah.
Is not being afraid of having to say, I don't know.
Right.
But let's review and analyze and come up with our best thinking about how to proceed.
Right.
And also, I care and I'm here. I have a number of elderly clients who, by virtue of their living situations, are on lockdown. Their own children can't come and see them.
Right.
And to have one more person who calls with some regularity and says, I'm thinking about you, and this is what's going on in the market, and no, I don't have a clue
Right.
of what tomorrow's going to bring, but we're in it together.
Yeah.
Is that's the value added.
Right. So I'm curious about that from the standpoint of the reaction you get from your clients when you say something like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Because I just, again, bias of mine in your world, do your clients want you to know? Do they want you to have the secret to the market? And so when you say, I don't know, I mean, there's some thinking out there that actually creates a neurochemical cascade in people's heads that cause them to feel closer to you when a leader shows vulnerability.
Interesting.
But is that the response you get?
For the most part. Now, I'm very fortunate in that I have a fairly large core group of clients who've been with me a very long time.
Right.
So we've had the crash of '87, and we've had the dot-com bust, and we've had 9/11.
Right.
And we've had 2007, 8,
Right.
9, and now. And so we've sort of walked some pretty perilous ground together, but I will say nothing like what we've been experiencing the last couple months. The feedback that I get is, if you said you knew, I'd be disappointed in you. Because
that's not what you've said before.
Right.
Right.
No, and it's funny. It does help me understand the magnitude of the events that we're living through right now. So it's an I don't know, but it's also a this is what I do know.
Right.
And having made strategic decisions over very long periods of time and followed a philosophy that we agreed to as client and portfolio manager, thankfully did not leave any of my clients, even in the face of what was obviously a horrendous March and April and into May, didn't leave people feeling like they were totally at loose ends. We knew that their portfolios were structured in such a way that they weren't taking more risk than was appropriate during normal times. That was at least a better jumping off point when the market started to crash.
Right.
So it's being genuine, it's being authentic, it's being forthright, it's not playing games, and it's not about me. So it's not representing, oh, but this is what I do for you.
Right.
It's we're in it together.
Right. Right. So far I've heard authentic and treating people as a resource and deep listening and not jumping into problem solving and being an empathic. Other personal or professional skills that you would say you find yourself calling upon on a regular basis in this work?
I would say that that humor goes a long way in life.
Yeah, right.
And certainly when you are when you're in a role where you're helping people or you're walking alongside people during some of their most difficult times, being able to keep perspective where appropriate, being able to look at the humor in situations.
Right.
I think in my industry, and I'm going to say, as a consumer, I know I feel this way. I want to know I surround myself with people who are who they say they are. They're committed to my good and welfare in whatever role they're in. They're able to see the depth of the seriousness of a situation, and they're also able to make light.
Yeah.
And recognize that the world, hopefully, is not coming to an end.
Yeah.
And there are times I let that humor be at my own expense.
Mm-hmm.
I let people know all the silly, foolish things that I'm up at 3 a.m. thinking about. But again, it helps. It just confirms for people I am who I am to you, my family,
right.
to my husband, to my kids, to my friends, to my business associates.
Right.
And I think that resonates for people.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think sometimes we all need a reminder of the yin and the yang, right? That
Correct.
We live in both.
Correct.
Right? We live in both. 35 years into this, the benefits to you of having facilitated your particular helping conversation.
I don't know that I'll ever be able to really quantify the impact of having made a difference for a lot of people. It's not what I expected to be a byproduct of this career. As I said earlier, I started on the institutional side where I was managing a bank's money. And not that I didn't have great colleagues, and obviously I learned this business from the ground up. But working with individuals and families and their philanthropies and knowing that I've made that kind of a difference.
Yeah.
People who are not particularly, I wouldn't call them particularly touchy-feely, have made a point of letting me know what a difference I've made for them. And I don't know that you get much more than that in this life. You know, you hear it from your family and you hear it from your best friends, but to be in a profession where you're talking about money all day, but you're talking about people's lives and who they love and who they care for, to know that that you make that kind of a difference, to me, that's really been the gift.
Yeah. So now I'm curious, is there a difference between what initially attracted you to the field and what keeps you in the field?
So as I said, I didn't really think I'd be in this field. When I got out of college, I did a stint working for what at the time was called a battered women's program. So in 1977, New York State first passed a law that assaulting your spouse was a criminal offense. Prior to that, it wasn't.
Right.
You got to go to family court and have someone walk your husband around the block, assuming it was male-female violence. And I did that for a little under 2 years, having been exposed to a couple of very high-risk situations where actually, in one instance, I did get hurt, being exposed to someone's spouse, and realized that being what I thought of as a service provider was not the road for me.
Right.
It also changed the way I looked at relationships, because I was meeting all of these couples, and particularly meeting spouses, boyfriends, husbands, who I thought to myself, that's someone I would date. They weren't glowing in the dark. You didn't know who they were.
Right.
And I looked at all that and finally said, my brother is going to take care of people. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do this. And went back to graduate school and really thought that my career was going to be in public policy.
Right.
And I had a fellowship for graduate school. I was supposed to go to Washington, D.C., and that's when this management trainee position came. So I never thought this is where I was going to be. And then being on the institutional side, very quantitative. I loved it. It was really interesting. When I started working in kind of the trust, estate, individual wealth management area, it was mind-blowing that I found this mix of the quantitative analysis, but also really making a difference with people.
Yeah.
So it sort of was my mix.
Yeah. Over the 35 years, some of the more challenging aspects of this particular helping conversation.
Not getting personally invested in the outcome.
Right.
I am 100% professionally invested in the outcome. I think that's my responsibility to give the best guidance or advice or strategies, and then what people choose to do. Be respectful and hope that I can help with implementation as appropriate. I guess I think of that fairly or unfairly as sort of the social worker part of me.
Right.
Is that I want what's best for people, and recognizing that what I think is best for someone is really kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's what they think is best.
Yeah.
And I guess the other side of it is I've gone from working for a small bank in Buffalo, and then many, many years at a Wall Street bank, and then about 10 years in my own firm, and most recently I've been with a smaller bank. Wanting the integrity of how the industry conducts itself to match up with the incredible obligation we have to people.
So that was one of my
trust
questions
us.
for you, would be, if you could speak to your industry.
Yes. This is, and I've said this in many presentations I've given, conversations I've had. This isn't taking a hit at any one institution.
Right.
It's the direction the industry has gone in, where banks create proprietary product, and then that is put in people's portfolios, or institutions, and certainly publicly traded institutions, They have an affirmative obligation to shareholders. And so then different decisions are made in that regard.
Right.
I sound like a dinosaur, but back in the day, there was never a question that your first priority was acting in a manner that was consistent with exactly what was best for your client.
Right.
And in many, many different respects, that is still the case, but it's being executed differently.
Right.
And not every client is particularly interested or understanding of that.
Right. Right. So I'm curious, when you say interested or understanding, they're not personally interested or understanding, or maybe, and again, not taking a shot at anybody, but maybe not being given all the information.
Yes. And people quite appropriately feel this is their money.
Yeah, you think?
Right? And there are legal structures when someone is the beneficiary of a trust. The truth is that's not their money.
Right.
There's a legal wrapper around
Right.
it, and they have access to income
Yeah.
or whatever the document says. But people are people. They still want that personal connection.
Right.
They don't want to hand their money over and be told, we'll talk to you in a year and let you know how you did.
Right.
And there are some organizational structures where, for any number of reasons, that's kind of the way the business is done. So many of the people who I meet are just searching to be connected
Yeah.
with the person and the entity that is shepherding their wealth, their family's wealth into the next generations. Right. And I'm very grateful. For the most part, as I've made different choices in my professional life, that's just been so important to me, and I've been able to find a home where I've been able to do that.
Right. I'm sitting here thinking about the gentleman in my life who helps me with my finances. And because, you and I and our brother always joke that the math wheelhouse you and our brother got, and I didn't get any of that. So I really need somebody who can wrap their head around the numbers. And I always walk out of meetings with Ryan, probably best case, I think I understand 90% of what he shared with me, but then the rest is trust.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
The rest is trust.
Absolutely.
That I don't have any question that this guy doesn't have my best, mine and Carol's best interests at heart.
Yes.
In managing our finances.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. They call when you read different literature that's out there, it's referred to as the trusted profession. And I truly do agree with that, but it makes me a little uncomfortable that word trust is thrown around these days. Yeah. That as long as you put out there you're a trusted advisor, you're a trusted counselor, you're a trusted...
Looks good on a business card.
Right. Where, in my estimation, trust is earned, and it's earned over time.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to ever refer to myself to someone else as I'm your trusted advisor. That's not for me to say.
Yeah.
That's for you to say.
That's a good point, right?
So you're paying him an enormous compliment.
Right.
Because if you're walking out and you're saying, I got 90% of it, and the rest is just, I know he's looking out for me.
Yeah.
That's what people in my profession, I think that's what we aspire to.
Right. So just to finish things up, how do you, given the rigors of your corner of the helping conversation, how do you keep yourself sane? How do you keep yourself growing, developing, and even after 35 years, what keeps you moving forward?
Yeah. I really love the work. The market is a very humbling place. You make a decision at 9:30 in the morning that looks brilliant, and by 2 in the afternoon, you look like an idiot. And this happens over and over and over again. And what I explain to people is that if you are having a conversation with someone who says they've never made a bad decision in the market, then they've probably been doing it for about an eye blink.
Right.
Because it just is the way the market works. It is perpetually a challenge.
Right.
It's also, it's interesting being at this stage in my career. What I really do feel very connected to is, as I mentioned, sort of this core group of clients who I've had for a very long time,
right,
who with regularity say, you can't retire till I die. But it's funny because I really do feel this connection.
Yeah.
I know what a difference I make for them. And
you know they're not saying that lightly.
No, they're
like
not.
That's serious when someone says that.
They are very serious.
Yeah.
They
and
are
a compliment to you.
And I take it
Right.
as that. It's
Right.
very gratifying to know that, I am up at night thinking about their money.
Right.
Thinking about the world as we all know it and how to explain what's going on to people. And it matters to them that I do that. So I see myself in the game for the foreseeable future.
Uh-huh.
And sort of really dying to see how this chapter ends.
Right.
In terms of what we're all living through right now.
Right. Awesome. Sandy Greer, thank you.
Thank you, Keith Greer.
This was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, it was fun.
Wonderful, and we've had bits and pieces of it through the years. It was nice to just sit and put this all in one place.
Yeah, so we're really not that far apart.
We are not that far apart. We're essentially doing the same conversation, you and I. Just a different initial topic.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, but thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, this was great. So I hope folks found this installment of the Helping Conversation meaningful and thought-provoking, and I hope that you can join us for the next episode as we continue to explore the practice, art, and science of the Helping Conversation. Have a great day, everyone.
We thank you for sitting in on our discussion today on just one unique version of the Helping Conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's podcast, so we sincerely invite you to follow, rate, and most importantly, review our episodes. Please join us for our next episode as we continue the exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of the Helping Conversation.